But this sermon series, Venerable Vices, the idea is simply that, we have things in our lives, sins in our lives. I don't just call them things, right? I don't even want to call them shortcomings, because that's not a word you hear anywhere but church. Right? Oh, I have a shortcoming here. And just use words that get to the point. But we look at them and we say, well, they're in my life, but it's not so big a deal. We treat them lightly. So we looked at all these categories. We take vice, sin, and we put them in these categories. So there's the flagrant ones, the ones that are out there, the ones that will take a movie rating and make it worse. It was about to be a family movie, but you threw some flagrant sin in there that everybody agrees is sin, and now it's rated R or worse, right? But these are lifestyles, words, attitudes that are a no for Christians, and we all agree. And we look out there and we point and we say, yeah, the world is, well, what a terrible place. But then we look at our own lives and we have things that we just we pretend that we keep them secret, right? Things I hope no one at church finds out about. Another category is struggles. These are weaknesses that I can admit in church. Things that I say, somebody says, I don't read my Bible. I don't read my Bible enough either. You can always say, I should be reading my Bible more. And everybody in the room says, yeah, you really should, and I should too. We can all just sort of pat each other on the back. But we really should, and it's sometimes a real problem that we're not. But it's something we can admit in church. Then there's flaws. Traits and habits I sometimes feel bad about, but mostly I justify. Well, there was a reason I felt this way. She shouldn't have said that. He shouldn't have done that. And there's reasons behind it. And then there's the planks. That's Jesus' term that he uses. These are things that are flaws in me, sins I commit, but I don't even see it anymore. Maybe because I was never taught correctly, or maybe it's just that I've become callous to the things that I do. So there's all these categories, and I'm not really in this sermon series dealing with red at all. I'm dealing with all the rest, which means we're looking at our own hearts. Okay, we're looking at ourselves. I think a good analogy that I read this week is it's like a woman getting ready in the morning. So I'm picturing after the shower, okay, she sits down and there's always a mirror involved. Women, there's not always mirrors involved when men get ready. So we don't always need them, We kind of know where our teeth are, we can, if we have an electric, I can generally feel where I need to shave. I have grown up with a lot of women in my life, and there's mirrors involved. There will be a mirror. But what is she doing in that mirror? She's not looking at the mirror. This is not time to ignore blemishes. This is time to find them, to go after them, to not let them out of the house, without something covering it up. And that's where our metaphor breaks down a bit, right? Because we're not here to cover up our venerable vices, but the opposite, to deal with them, to somehow find them in our hearts. And that's what the prayer in Psalm 139 is. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. I don't want the blemishes. I don't want to cover them up anymore either. I want you to come and convict my heart. Help me to change. Help me to do that. The vice that we're talking about today it goes by many terms. So, you might hear comparison, resentment, rivalry, but the more biblical term, the one you see most often in the Bible, is envy. And of course, I tend to think this one would be in the green category always, right? Because you're always green with envy. Even though that sounds like green usually means life, not with envy. It means like you're sick with it. But what is envy? It's a problem of the heart. So this is the definition we're going to go with. An indignant awareness of another's advantages or possessions with a desire to have the same. Just that simple. An indignant awareness that somebody else has something really great. And you look at that and you say, that doesn't seem right. That thing should be my thing. That accolade should have gone to me. We're in the same office, and this person keeps getting the attaboy. What about me? What's going on here? Jesus tells a parable, and he makes a keen point. For the kingdom of heaven is like a master of a house who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And going out about the third hour, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And to them he said, "You go into the vineyard too, and whatever is right, I'll give you." So they went. Going out again about the 6th hour and the 9th hour, he did the same. And about the 11th hour, the end of the day, he went out and found others standing. And he said to them, "Why do you stand here idle all day?" They said to him, "Because no one has hired us." He said to them, "You go into the vineyard too." And when evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the laborers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last up to the first." And when those hired about the 11th hour came, each of them received a denarius. Now when those hired first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received a denarius. And on receiving it, they grumbled at the master of the house, saying, "These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." Now there's more to the parable. I'm just going to stop here. I have read this parable many times. We have reenacted this parable. We have Bible dramas during VBS, and sometimes I really cannot read a Bible story without seeing particular people in those roles and the lines that they had. And so anyway, I'm picturing specific people. But we've done this story, and when I have done with this story, and I don't know if this is what you do too, I have sort of like an interpretive paradigm for this story. So I say, okay, Jesus told this story, and Matthew made sure it was recorded because there were some in Matthew's community who were saying the Gentiles entering the kingdom doesn't seem fair. Right? So behind this parable, Jesus knows they're going to have this attitude that's going to show up in the church. They're going to envy the fact that the Gentiles are coming in, and so he's sort of preparing them, saying, yeah, this is just like the parable that Jesus told. But here's the thing. This applies much more than just that one specific case of feeling like things are not fair. So I'm trying to extend this to many relationships that I have, and many times where I've been tempted toward envy. This is how it ends. But he replied to one of them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong." This is the master of the vineyard talking to those guys who thought they should get more money because they worked all day. "I'm doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give this last worker as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity? So the last will be first, and the first last." So you look at this and you say, aha, okay, there's a principle here. The principle is, if God is the owner of the vineyard, and I think we can make that jump pretty easily. If God's the owner of the vineyard, it all belongs to him. Whatever he gives to Jim Ice, he may not give to Jim McCain, even though they're the same person. The fact that your neighbor is next to you in proximity doesn't mean that you have the same car. That's never going to be the case. God gives as God wants to give. God is generous as he wants to be generous. And it's not unfair. You're receiving good things from God. That's the bottom line. And you're not somehow cheated because God didn't promise to be fair with everybody. But envy pokes its head up and says, this isn't fair at all. They've got better stuff going on here. I want to look at this phrase that Jesus uses here. Or do you begrudge my generosity? The literal translation, the words of that are, or is your eye malicious because I am generous? So is your eye evil? Is your eye looking at somebody else, giving them that evil eye? Like, they barely worked at all. They're getting the same amount. Envy is a sin of the eyes. It's a sin of the heart, but it begins with the eyes. It's something that you're looking and noticing. Envy is from the Latin invidia, which is a breakdown of two words, a preposition in, and videre, which means to see. So it's in seeing mode, right? I'm looking around and the things I'm seeing have me all up in knots. Can't believe what I'm seeing. It doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem like they deserve it. It doesn't seem like on and on it goes. Now you see this again in the Bible. Back in 1 Samuel, and this is just after David slays Goliath. As they were coming home when David returned from striking down the Philistine, the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul, tambourines, songs of joy, with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another as they celebrated. Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul is very angry, and this saying displeased him. He said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day on. Saul is looking at David, and he's seeing now that he has won over the favor of the people. Even though their song really is just a rhyming of ideas, we've talked about that before, that they're actually not insulting Saul, they're just glorying in what God is doing through these men who are leading Israel. But he sees it as they're giving him the credit, they're going to give him the throne. And so now he's eyeing David. His look toward David has envy mixed in it. It has malice mixed in it. And then he's going to start throwing spears at David because he doesn't want David around. He's so envious of him. It happens with the eye and the heart. That's what envy is all about. So Jesus in his parable, here in these stories, and we could go through many stories, we're going to go through a couple more, but that's envy, the indignant awareness of another's advantages, thinking that's what I want, that should be mine. Now, envy has some destructive effects. It's happening in our hearts with our eyes and our heart, but it has outward effects. It leads to other things. First of all, envy, by its nature, strikes among peers. That's a term that is not mine, but it's found in many places. Envy strikes among peers. This is a quote from Basil. My friend's goodness afflicts me, and I complain at the happiness of my brother. Have you ever been there? That their happiness, the good thing that came into their life, the wonderful news that they got, it hits you like a pang. It hits you like, well, why couldn't that have been mine? And so the happiness of my brother turns into my complaint. But this happens among peers. Speaking of peers, I want to show you a picture. A picture from 1995. A picture from the 1900s, kids. This is the last day of class at Central Catholic High School, which is where I graduated. And everybody's being hooligans because it's the last day. They can't wait to get out of there. And yes, I went to a school where everybody had to wear a tie. This is moi. This is me. And I'm sitting there, it looks like very diligently, doing something with papers while everybody else is dancing around. But I'm looking to my right, and the guy on my right is a guy named Mark. And his last name is close to my last name, so he was in my homeroom. His desk was next to mine or in front of mine all the time. We talked all the time. We were good buddies. Well, as the years went on after 1995, after we graduated, Mark became an NFL quarterback. He played for it was at that time the St. Louis Rams. And that was one of the coolest things. I mean, I could tell people, I know him. I know that guy. He went to WVU, and then he was drafted by the Rams and played for them either before or after Kurt, what's his name? Warner, thank you. I always do crowdsourcing when I don't know answers during these sermons. But here's the thing. I have never, and I'm being honest with you, all right? We're trying to be honest. I have never envied Mark Baldwin. Never once. Not just because I don't want to run away from linebackers coming in my face and wanting to, break my bones. I don't want that, so I don't envy that. But Mark and I, when it came to football, were never peers. Right? Never, ever. Right? It just was never going to happen. We're not peers. We graduated at the same time. We are the same age, but that's about where it ends. Right? We were friends, but I have other famous people that I graduated with too. They're not in my league, so I'm not envious. I was never envious of Mark. I was happy for Mark. And like I said, it's a fun story to tell that you know somebody who is famous like that. But envy strikes among peers. It's going to be something that arises from somebody on the same, I hate to say the same level, but like in the same walk of life, in the same place where you are. For example, the first real nasty bit of envy we see in the Bible. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell. The Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry, and why is your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it." Cain and Abel were peers. Siblings are almost always peers. And so they compete with each other. There's rivalry. There's envy when somebody gets something. There's something inside, this just doesn't feel fair. We don't know why Cain's sacrifice was rejected. But in Cain's mind, it's not fair. It wasn't right. Something was wrong there. And God's telling him, there's sin in your heart, and that's the bigger problem here than the other things that you feel are unjust. Because the next thing is, Cain spoke to Abel, his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. And the Lord said to Cain, "Where is Abel your brother?" He said, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" And the Lord said, "What have you done?" Second time God says that in the Bible, first with Adam and Eve. "The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground." Envy took over, and the first murder takes place. James says this can be a problem in church among people who call each other brothers and sisters. What causes quarrels and fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and do not have. That's envy. So you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. Now, I do not believe that in James' church there's all kinds of murder going on. I think he's being figurative here. He's saying you're destroying each other's relationships. Friendships are ending because of this envy that's inside of you, this desire and the do not have, and so you fight and you quarrel and go after each other. You ask and you don't receive because you only want to use it for your passions anyway. Your passions are the boss, is what James is saying. And envy is a passion. So envy threatens relationships. It always does. You are not going to be in a healthy, good, sound relationship with somebody who you envy. It's just simply not going to be the case. There's going to be a fracture there, at least under the surface, until it comes out in other ways. And envy, happening in the eyes of the heart, leads to more obvious sins. So it's one of those parent sins, leads to other more obvious things. And I just thought of a few that we've seen either in Scripture or in real life where envy was the heart and then led to other things. Last week, on the far left there, you see gossip. We talked about gossip last week. We talked about how, sometimes there's these opportunities to talk about somebody, share bad news behind somebody's back with a bad heart. The bad heart thing is often envy. That's often what leads somebody to decide, I'm going to share bad news about him or about her. And because that's part of trying to make things fair. I'm going to share this news. It might hurt their feelings, but, now they'll know how I feel because they shouldn't have had that advantage. They shouldn't have had what I deserve to have. And so it can lead to all kinds of terrible things. So let's get to the positive, right? How can we fight against envy? I, again, read a book this week in preparation for this, simply called Envy, A Big Problem You Didn't Know You Had. Wonderful book, very short. I highly recommend it. Not just because it's short, but because it's good. But it talks about Scripture it talks about how we need to take this sin seriously, and we have not. We haven't done a very good job of making this a thing we talk about, a priority, a thing that we take seriously as a problem in our hearts. So how can we fight against envy? He gives some ideas. The first is foster the peace of contentment. Contentment is sort of like the underlying idea here in our theme today, along with humility. And take a look at this. This is 1 Timothy. But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. Here Paul is reminding Timothy, look, there's going to be times where you're going to feel like you deserve more, or you want more, and you wish you had this, or you wish you had that. But if you could be content along with this effort of trying to be more and more like Christ, trying to be more and more godly, then there is great gain. Remember, the theme scripture today, humility with the fear of the Lord leads to great riches. Well, it's because of a change of heart, a change of the way I see the things God has already placed in my life. So we ask ourselves the question, what has God given me? What are the good things that I have? I know I'm focused in an envious heart, I'm focused on what somebody else has. But that is clouding my memory. It's clouding my understanding of how good God has been to me. I'm forgetting all the good gifts from his hand. And the question then becomes, how does God want me to use what he has given me? The focus being my service to God, not what somebody else has and what I deserve that they have. There's a story, an amazing story, about a woman named Jen Bricker. And she was born with a genetic condition where she had no legs. She did not develop legs in utero. And she was abandoned in the hospital by her mother. Her mother felt like she couldn't handle having a baby like this. So she's adopted by a family in Illinois. The amazing thing, though, is she played sports, including gymnastics. Just think about that, right? If there was anybody going through life who thought, you know what, gymnastics clearly is not for me, it would have been a girl like this. She said, well, all the things that I want to do, I'm sure I won't be able to do gymnastics. But she did. She competed. She got trophies. She did incredibly well and lived her life. And now she is somebody who goes around giving talks, inspirational talks. And this is what she said. I went through a long period of time as a kid when I had serious body issues. I didn't like what I saw in the mirror. I wanted to be tall and delicate with ballerina arms. Instead, I was short with bodybuilder biceps. I had to do a lot of soul searching, and I arrived at the decision that God gave me this body for a reason. Then he gave me these talents and abilities to go with this body, so I would catch people's attention, which is also my chance to educate, inform, and inspire. So her take on what God did was God said, I'm going to make you exactly this way. And I'm going to give you this drive and this talent to do this amazing sport and do these amazing things. The body I gave you. She said, that was from God, so that now I can really catch people's attention. What do you mean a gymnast with no legs? What is that? And she said, it's to God's glory that I do these things. It must be what God had in mind. So if anybody could have been envious, if anybody could have walked around thinking, you know, in this life, I should have had this, I should have had that, it would have been her. But she went through life thinking, how does God want me to glorify him in what he has given me? And in fact, maybe what he has given me has its own kind of testimony and strength to it. In James, we read this, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. That word perfect is the word teleos, and it means complete, but in this case, a better translation would be fitting or just right. God gives the things in your life that you need that are just right for you. And not just right for you to enjoy, but just right for you to then be able to use to turn around to his glory. That's the point. So the good things I have in my life, if I just have an open heart to what he has given me, I can be content, have the humility to say, this is the life that God has called me to. Not his life, not her life, not his gifts, not her gifts, but he's called me to this, and it fits me. It's fitting. It's just what I need to give glory to him in my way. Second point, love starves out envy. Just starves it out. It has nothing to eat if you begin to love that person. In the book, he makes a great example. He says that when young people they become pregnant and then have a baby, what happens is two people who are super selfish, all of a sudden, from one day to the next, they don't mind all the mess, they don't mind the late nights, they don't mind having to take care of somebody. They later on won't mind driving to this and driving to that and clear my schedule because this is happening in the night. On and on and on. Why? Well, because they love their child. So you automatically love your children. And when your children succeed and good things happen to them and they get accolades and they get trophies, no parent is envious of their child. Wouldn't that just be bizarre? Just think of that. You would think a parent who watches their child win a trophy and they say to themselves, I did pretty well in that when I was your age. In fact, I probably did it better than you right now. You would think that parent is mentally ill. There's something wrong with you. Because you're just supposed to be loving. Like, oh, this is great. Your victory is my victory. You give hugs and you say, wow, we're putting this up on the mantle, this trophy that you got. That's what parents do because they love. When you love somebody, envy just has nowhere to go. It's impossible to continue to envy somebody. That's the connection Paul makes in 1 Corinthians. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy. It just doesn't. They're opposites. That's oil and water. A great example of this is John the Baptist. In John chapter 3, they came to John and said to him, Rabbi, he who is with you across the Jordan, to whom you bore witness, look, he is baptizing, and all are going to him. This very thing you wanted to do, which was to go out and have people come listen to you, this is now being transferred to that guy. And what's John's response? John answered, a person cannot receive even one thing unless it is given him from heaven. Can we just pause there? This is exactly what we were just talking about. John says, I already had all this from God, that I was in a position to get things ready for this guy. That was my part to play. That was my role, and I'm fine with that role. That was given from heaven. Already I've received from heaven. You yourselves bear me witness that I said, I am not the Christ, but I have been sent before him. The one who has the bride is the bridegroom. The friend of the bridegroom who stands and hears him rejoices greatly at the bridegroom's voice. Therefore, this joy of mine is now complete. He must increase, but I must decrease. That's a beautiful attitude. That is the attitude we have to adopt. If John's love for Jesus, well, of course he has to increase and I decrease. I'm not the groom. I'm just standing next to the groom, and I get to clap at the ceremony where he takes his place as the Messiah. I'm not the Messiah, John said. And this just carries on to the third point. Rejoice in God's goodness to others. That's what John's doing. That's what we're called to do. If one member suffers, Paul writes, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. In almost a parallel passage in Romans, he says, rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep, live in harmony with one another. Is it easier to weep with someone who weeps or rejoice with someone who rejoices? I would have thought before this lesson that in every situation it's just easy to rejoice with somebody who's had good news, who something good has come into their life. But imagine that you went through life and you never found that one person. You never found somebody to marry. You never got married. But you kept waiting and hoping, praying that somebody would bring somebody into your life, that God would bring a person that you could marry and live with. But then you find out your sister found somebody, and then you find out she's getting married, and she's invited you to be a bridesmaid. Will you rejoice with someone who's rejoicing? You're not able to have children year after year, but you get invited to the baby showers. Do you still rejoice with those who are rejoicing? Do you take a pass? Do they give you a pass, and do you take it? You say, well, that might be a little painful for me. Does envy crouch at the door when you hear that news? Sometimes rejoicing with those who rejoice is tough. It's tough work. Because it's going against the grain of our desires. Because we want it so badly. And they have it. And they have this life that I thought I would have. All my plans and all my dreams. And what about me? Who's going to rejoice with me? But we're called to keep loving, to keep rejoicing when my brother or my sister is shown goodness from God. It may not seem fair, but we can't give in to envy. We can't give in to those toxic feelings that Satan wants to foster inside of us. Because that envy, then, that only happens in the heart of the honest, will leak out into all other places, and that relationship will end. So that's what we're talking about today. This miserable thing called envy. Somebody said of all the 7 deadly sins, envy is the only one that's no fun at all. I don't know about that. I haven't looked through them again to make sure. I don't know. But I know it's not fun. I've been there, and I don't ever want to go back to that. But the good thing, as we talk about all this, is that the vices, as venerable as we think they might be, they never have to be the end of the story. They never have to be the end of our Christian character, because we follow Jesus Christ. We are disciples of the one who said, I have come that they might have life and have it abundantly. And that begins with these sins being washed away, taken out of the record books. We're no longer going to be marked and defined by our envy, by our gossip, by any of these other sins that we're going to be talking about. They can be forgiven permanently. And God can look down on us and lead us now, as that psalm said, lead us in the ways everlasting, the ways that he wants us to walk in. Today, maybe you need to respond and say, yes, envy, gossip, all the others, yeah, I have those things in my life. I need them taken away. I need them dealt with. We know that the Bible promises, you come to him in faith, you come to him in repentance, and he's already made, through his Son, a way for those to be taken away from you. Maybe you need to be baptized into Christ. Have your sins leave. You have the old you die, have the new you be raised to new life. Again, that's the promise of God to you. So if you need to take him up on that, and end with good news here, rather than simply ending with this idea that Satan has all these ways to get at us. If we want to end this on a good note, then come as we stand and sing.